Managers, do you have special tests for interviewees that you put them through without their knowing?
As if it isn't already difficult enough to get a decent job nowadays, let's see what tricks these managers have up their sleeves to just make it that much harder. Story 1. Back in the early 50s, when Truman was still the emperor and jobs were given out like candy because of the economic boom after the Second World War, and candy was given out like jobs and so on and so forth, I was a hiring manager for a small company you may have heard of called IBM, or Intimidatingly Burly Men. It was my responsibility to enlist only the best candidates, so I was forced to come up with lots of subtle personality tests to determine the best man for the job. If I remember correctly, women were not allowed jobs until the late 80s, and even then only as secretaries or nurses or eye candy. One of the first things I'd do with a new candidate is lay a salt lick and a lemon drop on the table in front of them. I would ask them which piece of candy they wanted. Remember, if you would, that candy was given out like jobs, and it was a not-so-subtle metaphor for a job. If the candidate reached for the salt lick, they were a go-getter who was willing to do anything to please me. If they reached for the lemon drop, they were a go-getter who was willing to make their intentions to be a hard and diligent worker known. My next test involved mixing very different jigsaw puzzles together on the table. One was a Bob Ross original that I cut up with an X-Acto knife, and the other was a picture of me taken at the 1918 World Fair, where I am crying after having dropped my ice cream, and asked them to assemble the two original pictures. If they refused and told me it was a pointless task, they were a go-getter who didn't waste their skills with frivolous time sinks. If they spent the requisite 10 hours putting together all 46,000 pieces, they were a go-getter who was willing to drop everything, especially their sanity, to get the job done. I like to think my tests really separated the candidates with no go-getter attitude from those who had it. In the end, we ended up with some of the greatest minds in the world. I'm good. It seems like this guy just thinks everybody's a go-getter, no matter which way you splice it. And that's kind of a nice way to look at it. There's always a positive spin on different characteristics and personality traits if you're willing to look for it. But what I'm most interested in is the final puzzle. Once it's put together, if you mix both and match both, I think you'll end up with a happy little man with a happy little ice cream cone and a happy little tree. But we won't tell anybody about these happy little trees. They'll be our little secrets.
Story 2. I work in retail and am training to be a hiring manager. I was talking to coworkers about this very question earlier this week, and she told me her old boss's strategy. When a hopeful would show up for an interview, the manager would do a brief introduction, then feign some sudden distraction, apologize, then tell the interviewee to just walk around the sales floor and familiarize themselves while the manager resolves the issue. While the newbie walks around, the manager would have their sales floor associates casually approach the interviewee as if they were a customer and have a brief conversation. The idea was that they would end up just shooting the crap about the job and their motives for applying. The person tends to be so wound up in preparing to talk to the boss, they often loosen up when they think they're in the confidence of an equal. Sometimes it's a person who gets along well and would really make a great addition to the team. On the other hand, one guy almost immediately admitted to another worker that he only wanted the job to support his growing drug habit. People lie, especially to the interviewer, and especially when they need a job. This strategy allowed the manager to avoid a lot of potential liabilities and a lot of wasted interviewing time. Plus, these people would be working directly with the people doing the informal interview with them, not with the boss. It's important for the new guy to get along with the current crew, and this tactic lets you know that almost immediately. I also like that the manager put enough trust in his associates to allow them to be a part of the process. Sometimes a second set of eyes makes a big difference.
Okay, that's a good test, but also, as the interviewee, I would want to find a place to work where I can actually be myself, and not feel like I have to pretend to be a certain way. We all have our various personas that are circumstantial, but I've found that if I'm true to myself in interviews, then I end up getting a better match for a job that I actually want, and it suits myself. Of course, you can only do this when you have the luxury of being choosy about employment, and I know not everybody has that privilege.
Story 3. I was a manager for Staples for a little bit, did some hiring of computer techs, computer salesmen, office supply folks, copy and print people, and general frick around, also called cashiers. There was this one woman with 6 felony convictions that I had to interview for legal purposes. She wore ill-fitting clothes and looked like she just came from a war-torn area. Rumpled clothes, dirty face, messed up hair. Her resume was crap too. I had asked her about the felony convictions, and she told me that she used to do a lot of drugs and got caught, also a few DUIs. She pulled out her 1-year Narcotic Anonymous and 6-month Alcoholics Anonymous coins and said that she just needed someone to give her a chance. She loves working with people and wants to get her life back on track. I took her around the store, and several people asked me where things were, and I saw her watching me. I'd straighten things on the shelf, smile at people, talk to kids, etc. She started doing the same thing after just a few minutes. I needed a cashier soon, so I hired her. The next day she came in to do some computer training, and she passed with flying colors. I stuck her on the register with another manager, and she did great. After 2 months, I promoted her to my customer service lead, and our overall customer satisfaction score rose by over 10 points because of this. The extremely friendly cashier, great cashier, hilarious, loved this store, best cashier ever. Left my wallet with over $1,000 in it at the store, and the short, butch cashier chased me down to give it to me. Great lady, great store, and many more. I can't judge a book by its cover or where it's been, I guess. Last I heard was that she was in management training. Edit. Thanks for the cool replies. I left the company for greener pastures about 6 to 8 months after that. Now I don't get to hire anyone, except interns or work-study recipients. I spoke to her on Facebook again, and she said that she was turned down for more than a dozen jobs before I gave her a chance. Walmart, Warehouse Market, Office Depot, Food Pyramid, and little stores like that turned her down without interviewing her. She called every place, and they said that her criminal record made it difficult for them to hire her to work with money. She's about to get her 2-year AA pin next week. That's a great story. I wish every manager out there could read it.
Any guesses on this one? Though I do have a degree in applied mathematics, I feel like I used up all my brain power in my 20s, and now I can't be bothered to try to solve this one. Some quick research suggests that the answer is 40 minutes, but I'll see if anyone can explain it in the comments. Have at it.
Story 4. An exec at my former company used to ask this question, or brain teaser. He wouldn't expect someone to be able to solve it in a few minutes. It just served to gauge how they worked under pressure, and he would often let the interviewee take home the question. There's a married couple where the husband works from home and the wife commutes to work. Every day, the husband drops her off at the bus stop. She takes the bus to and from work, and he picks her up exactly when her bus arrives at the end of the day. One day, she gets off work early and decides to take an earlier bus. She takes a bus 1 hour before her usual time. Assume that this means it drops her off 1 hour early. The husband does not know this and leaves home at the usual time to pick her up. Assume for simplicity that he drives at the same constant speed. The wife, arriving at the bus stop, decides to start walking toward home so that the husband can pick her up en route, which he does, and they arrive home 20 minutes earlier than they usually do. How long was the wife walking for before he picked her up? Story 6. Also an engineering manager, one of the things I do for drafting types is have them do a model for something I sketch up. I leave something important off, such as a thread size, part thickness, or maybe hole location, just to see how long it takes them to ask for clarification. People try to be self-reliant to prove themselves, so it makes a lot of people squirm once they figure out they don't have all the information. A good candidate not only finds the missing information quickly, but communicates the issue and seeks out the answer. 4 out of 5 assume an answer, which kills me when I ask the question, do you think your print is ready for manufacturing? Sometimes it really is true that a candidate that has all the answers is someone who never asks the right question. Completely reasonable test. Tangent, I recall a story from Lockheed Martin, I think. One of the engineers sent plans to be fabricated, but didn't specify well enough. 2 inches versus 2.000 inches. And so most of the parts didn't fit together. Story 7. This reminds me of a joke. 3 wannabe MI5 agents are being interviewed. 2 men and a woman. They're given guns and told to go into a room and shoot whoever's in there, but they're not told that the guns contain blanks. The first man goes in and sees his girlfriend sitting on a chair in the middle of the room. He immediately breaks down in tears and can't do it. The second man goes in and sees his wife on the chair. After 30 minutes, he pulls the trigger and emerges distraught. He's passed the test, but his wife hates him. The woman goes in and sees her husband on the chair. After 10 minutes, she comes out covered in blood. The interview says, "What the frick happened? The gun was loaded with blanks." "I know," she said angrily. "I had to beat him to death with the chair." I like that the married interviewees are the one who managed to pass the test. Story 8. I've typically interviewed people for technical positions, which is a piece of cake. Number 1, ask them technical questions about the job. And number 2, ask them specific details about knowledge they claim to have on their resume. Where I work, padding your resume will get you tossed out rather quickly. But not after being lightly chided for putting stuff on your resume that you don't actually know. People with some network experience tend to pad their resume a bit too much. I remember one guy who listed BGP as one protocol he had experience with. I pressed him to explain it to me, and he caved, then admitted that BGP was used in a project he was involved in, but he had nothing to do with it and didn't understand it. That type of stuff does not fly with me. If you put it on your resume, you better freaking know it, or I'm going to find out and embarrass you.
This is something that gets under my skin too. People who try to fluff up their jobs beyond what it actually is, just to sound more professional. LinkedIn especially is a very cringy platform where this happens all the time. I get that we're all trying to market ourselves to get better jobs and higher pay, but sometimes it just does more harm than good, and you end up coming across as really fake.
Story 9. I work in a movie theater. We want fun people who are easygoing and enjoy having conversation. We sit them down all formal-like and go over their application and ask about school and whatnot. Then a serious face. Then if you could weigh Mount Everest, how would you? Where would you hide an elephant? What kitchen appliance would you be and why? Questions like that, to get them to open up. If they don't laugh or be all serious like, "I'll Google that," they automatically are not hired. Kinda silly and sucky, but all our employees have great attitudes and love their job.
I imagine many job seekers just want a normal human candidate that is pleasant to be around. People can learn technical skills, but people skills are harder to come by. And if you've got to spend your workday with this person, I'm guessing that you want to make sure that they won't drain the life out of you.
Story 10. I interviewed with a company recently who told me about their process for interviewing sales engineers. They would go about the normal interview, but that evening, they would all go out for drinks and try to pump the recruits full of alcohol. It was meant to be fun, but also a test of whether the person can either know their limits and politely decline, or hold their own after a lot of drinks. Apparently, drinking is a big part of sales. Getting the other person drunk while seeming to not try to get the other person drunk while not getting yourself drunk is extremely useful for getting a better price or larger order or contract. Story 11. One of the most dangerous types of people in an engineering environment is those who won't admit that they don't know how to do something. For this reason, if a candidate couldn't admit at least once during the entire interview that they didn't know an answer, I would raise a huge red flag. With some candidates, I could ask them esoteric question after esoteric question that any reasonable person would see that is okay not to know, and they would hedge and dance around it or try and guess the answer. My favorite was, what are the first 4 bytes of a file that identifies it as a Java class?
Another good piece of advice: be humble. No one likes a know-it-all, and no one knows everything, so just be real about it, and you're more likely to land on people's good sides.
Story 12. IT manager here. I always try to make the person perform a task or write code that will directly relate to the actual job. For example, if you're a front-end HTML jockey, you get a screenshot and an hour to build the page in HTML with Notepad. The special part of the test is that there's no way you can finish it in an hour. So it's as much a question of prioritization as it is technical ability. One guy wasted the whole hour trying to make the rollovers work. No offer. The guys who got offers were the ones who got a basic page running, then went back and went after the frills. Story 13. When I was applying to work at a chemical plant, my future supervisor gave me a sheet with several short chemistry problems on it. The first 2 were normal derivation formulas. The rest were just asking for the names and properties of the compounds listed. I was sweating and getting more and more confused, until he took the paper back from me, adding the answers. They were all jokes. Things like a ring of 6 iron molecules equals Ferris wheel. He just said, "This is a really dumb place to work, so you'll have to have a good sense of humor here. One of my favorite jobs ever. Ferris wheel, Ferris wheel." Story 14. I'm an editor who sometimes has to hire other editors. The interview is just a formality for me. The resume and cover letter tell me almost everything I need to know. Mistakes on the resume? No way you're getting a call. Disorganized or confusing layout? No thanks. I need people whose main goal is to communicate clearly. Applicants move up in the pool if their style choices, such as using the Oxford comma, match my company's, because I figure it will be easier for them to conform to our style guidelines. I'll also look for writing samples on the web. Yay, Oxford comma.
Who gives a frick about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, that's fine with me. Who gives a frick about an Oxford comma? I've climbed to Dharamshala too. I did. I met the highest lama. His accent sounded fine to me. If you know, you know.
Story 15. I'm a supervisor and have done interviews. I don't ask the typical BS questions. I keep it really relaxed. Have a conversation and just get to know the person while talking about the job. That way I know what they're really like and not putting on an act for the interview. At the other end of the table, I enjoy these interviews the most. Whether I get the job or not, I at least feel like I've put my best foot forward and haven't resorted to cheap cliches. I also feel like the person across from me is more intelligent than the regular trained HR monkeys. Story 16. I really hate crap like that. You know what? Maybe that person has been to a restaurant before and knows that they like their food saltier than any restaurant serves it. So they save their god-dang time by putting salt on it at the beginning. And just maybe, it has absolutely nothing to do with how well they manage an assembly line. That facet of business culture is such a load of BS and only exists so that people can perpetuate this system of focusing more on a superficial game than doing actual good work. Story 17. Your dad is a freaking boss. My old manager kept a stack of comic books, a lot of old school superheroes, and some of the Star Wars graphic novels on a mini fridge behind his desk. He'd always offer the interviewee a bottle of water from the fridge, but in order to get it, he'd have to slightly shift the comic books. If they mentioned the nerdiness or coolness of him having them, or asked him about them, then they would be much more likely to be hired. Caleb was a pretty cool guy. Story 18. My workplace has a very long hiring process, usually 7 to 10 interviews. During one technical interview, a technical person grills the interviewee until they have to give an "I don't know" answer. They do this several times. We then take the questions they answered "I don't know" to and send them to another technical person who has an interview with the same person, scheduled a week later, and we ask them again. The purpose is to see if the person has the initiative to look up the answers after the first interview.
This is a good tactic, and while yes, it helps to have hard technical skills when job seeking, more often than not, you can learn on the job, and hiring managers just want to know that you have the ability to pick up new skills and are willing to learn.
Story 19. I'd always ask folks to use a particular subject line when sending in their resume for a particular job. Nothing crazy, just please send an email with programming position as the subject to... It kind of floors me how few people could manage to actually do this. I noticed when they did. I did the same thing on Craigslist. I put in a code word at the end of the ad to make sure people actually read the specs and requirements. Often, they don't. Story 20. Not a manager, but I've interviewed people for IT positions. I ask people what their biggest screw-up was and how they recovered from it. Anyone who actually tries hard at their job will make mistakes, and recovering from those mistakes is a valuable learning process. If you can't give a good answer to that question, you're either a liar or lazy. Or they just haven't had a position with a ton of responsibility or opportunities to really mess up. I mean, I guess that says something too, just something different. Story 21. I used to give interviews for a recruiter that tried to find teachers that wanted to teach abroad. One of my favorite test questions was, pretend you just finished teaching a lesson about farm animals, like cows, chickens, sheep, etc. Then, the next day, a student runs up to you and says, Teacher, my favorite farm animal is the velociraptor. What would you do? Only one person ever responded. Well, first I'd ask the kid how he knew what a velociraptor was, but not a cow. Story 22. When I have a big stack of resumes, I randomly split them into 2 piles, and then throw one of them in the trash. That way I never work with anyone who is unlucky. On a serious note, bring at least 1, preferably 2 copies of your resume. When I ask you why I should hire you, say something honest and tangible. Everyone is a fast learner. Also, everyone is a team player. These are the 2 most worthless comments you can make to me. Story 23. I always test people. I'm a retail assistant manager, and I will have other associates go start up conversations with them about theft and other stuff. They get buddy-buddy and start chatting, and hopefully the applicant will not be stupid and say something bad. But twice now I've had possible applicants have a 30-minute plus conversation about how easy it will be to steal from my store. Don't trust your future coworkers until they're actually your coworkers. Story 24. I don't understand the quote and bidding process and why it needs to be so complicated and mysterious. What I always do is get a bunch of quotes from different vendors. I then show all of the vendors everybody else's quotes, and then let them all come back with another round of quotes. I then pick the vendor who takes me out to the nicest restaurant for lunch to discuss their proposal. That way, everybody wins. Story 25. I used to do interviewing for a job that was basically hacking the internet. At some point in the interview, I'd ask them increasingly advanced questions until they came to something they didn't know. Then I'd explain it to them. If they thought the new thing was really cool, that was a big plus. It showed they really were interested in the job itself, not just in the paycheck. Story 26. I was managing tech support reps and would ask them to provide me with shoe tying tech support. Without looking at me, they would have to talk me through tying my shoe. If they could explain it step by step and I ended up with a tied shoe, they would invariably be patient with less tech-savvy customers and able to break complicated concepts into their component parts. Story 27. Screw these tests. Most of them are abusive and insulting. If you're not a psychologist, stop acting like you can summon the core of someone's character with a barely clever mind game. If an analysis of relevant skills and a follow-up conversation can't tell you what you need to know about an applicant, you suck at hiring. And you're taking advantage of your power by making applicants dance for you. Story 28. I'm in the middle of interviewing senior software engineers right now. I ask them all, what sucks about X, where X is the current language they're using. This is generally done in a fairly lighthearted manner after I ask them to briefly describe their background, and they mention the main technology they're using. It's not a trick or anything, but it's the most important question I ask. Story 29. A lot of what I've learned from this is I have a special quirk or like, and if I make a reference to it and you don't get it, respond to it, you don't make the cut. Yeah, baby. Nothing like eliminating a lot of good people just because you're so narrow-minded to think the right person has to like or know or relate to that one thing of yours. Story 30. I heard a similar urban legend that in the Google lobby and office, they have a bunch of playground equipment and random objects, but no normal chairs. When people come in for an interview, they make them wait, and if they stand the whole time instead of sitting on the playground equipment, they're less likely to be hired. Ex-Googler here, that is most definitely not true.
I wonder what the logic is in this one. They don't want boring people working at Google? I get that to a degree, but it seems that some people are just straight-laced and overly professional. They can still be productive and add value to the company in their own way, but yeah, Google in particular has always been one of those work hard, play hard companies with really kooky perks, so I guess I could believe this one.
Story 31. No, I don't believe in gimmicks when hiring someone. It's akin to setting them up to fail. I'd rather have a casual chat to get to know them. I am, however, a believer in probationary periods, the reason being to see if you can fit in and can handle the job. Story 32. If you don't push your chair in at Cracker Barrel after the interview, 9 times out of 10, they won't hire you. Manners matter. Cracker Barrel is one of the worst places to work on the planet. They are so obsessed with their southern charm that the managers have their heads up your butt all day long. Story 33. I ask a question of medium difficulty that any competent person would be sure to get right. Then I ask them if they are sure about their answer, implying that it's wrong. Tells you a lot about how they react to feedback and how they communicate with a client or boss when they think they're wrong. Story 34. My dad would have a rubber chicken waiting in the interviewee's chair when they came into the room and watch them deadpan to see what they did with it. Oh, my apologies. I didn't realize the last applicant was still here. Story 35. There's some good stuff in here, but a lot of it is about as useful as checking the potential employee's horoscope. Our company is a Libra, and this possible new hire is a Capricorn. It's fated we hire him. Story 36. I used to work in a cafe. The work was simple. I asked applicants to butter me 2 slices of bread and put a slice of cheese on it to make a sandwich. Those who failed to wash their hands first failed. Story 37. My boss does. She comes in late for interviews very often. But if she's actually on time and the interviewee is late, they don't get a job. I call the test hypocrite. Story 38. Engineering manager here. I draw a right triangle, label 2 sides 3 and 4, and then ask them for the remaining side. Many engineers fail this, or try to trigger it out. Story 39. My boss does the walking test. He does walking interviews, and will change his pace, see if people will keep up with the change in pace. Big thing in hotels. Story 40. If he came back and saw the vendor picking up BBs, he asked him to leave immediately, because clearly they were too stupid to slide the cup over. Story 41. I ask them to brutally kill their firstborn son and sacrifice him in my honor. If they don't do well, I have to think twice about hiring them. Story 42. If they bring a pen or pencil, they're on top of the pile of applications. I bought a pen to apply for jobs with me and got a call the next day. Story 43. This thread is scaring the crap out of me. I'm desperately unemployed and had 2 big interviews this week that I thought went well.
I've been hit with these kinds of questions before. 2 of them that come to mind were, they asked me how fast would I drive when the speed limit is 55, and I said, 55, 60, 65, and looking back, I probably gave the wrong answer for that. I think it's pretty clear now that they were asking if I was one who would obey the rules, stay within the principles, or if I was someone who would cut corners. I did not get that job. Same company actually, but different job position. They asked what superhero would I want to be, and again, I gave kind of a weird roundabout answer that probably made me seem kind of silly at face value, because I said Mystique, but not for the reasons that you're thinking. I actually had a pretty clever idea behind this one. Not sure if they picked up on it, but I said because she can shapeshift, and I thought it would bode well, putting out the idea that I could put on different hats and take on different roles and really thrive in whatever position they thought I would be a good fit for in the company. But yeah, they were probably just hung up on the fact that I picked a curvaceous superhero. Whatever. I ended up getting a job at the company in a different role, so it worked out in the end.
Story 44. Tricks on Henry Ford. I never use condiments. Yes, you'll swindle the heck out of him at the next interview he has. Story 43. Behavior-based questioning is the name of the game in corporate HR offices. Story 44. This thread convinces me just how irrational and fickle people are. Story 45. No offense to interviewers here, but you all seem like dongs. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.